The Subcommittee on Government Operations and the Subcommittee on Information Technology will come to order, and without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Welcome. I'm pleased to hold this hearing to hear from the acquisition and technology leaders at the General Service Administration, also called GSA. And in June, GSA announced a realignment of the Technology Transformation Service within the Federal Acquisition Service that I'd like to really understand a little bit better. I'd also like to continue up on our conversation that we started in March of this year in the hearing on the Federal Acquisition System challenges and reforms. Annually, FAST is responsible for over $50 billion in goods and services bought by the federal government, while the TTS focuses primarily on the technology modernization. So in May of 2016, GSA established the TTS as a standalone service to consolidate technology-related functions and to assist other agencies with technology transformation. And just over a year later, GSA has realigned TTS so that it is no longer a standalone service, and the director of the TS now reports to the FAST commissioner. And so I'd like to hear more about that from GSA and about the thinking behind that realignment. Second, I'd like to continue the conversation we started in March about the federal acquisition challenges that make it difficult for the government to buy goods and services at the best price and in a timely manner. The ever-increasing complexity of system and associated compliance costs have a lot to do with these challenges. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR as it's sometimes referred to, has over 2,000 pages, and each agency has associated supplements to FAR. Like GSA, which has the General Service Acquisition Regulations, we understand that these complex compliance issues make it very problematic. And so I'm looking forward to hear how we overcome those compliance costs. But let me just highlight one area, because there's some indication that the compliance cost alone costs over $4 billion annually. Now, the cost of this complexity is actually passed through in terms of higher costs for the customer. In fact, GSA's own IG found that 75% of the top-selling products on the GSA IT schedule actually could be bought 13% lower on the open market than the lowest price on the schedule. Now, you would think if we're buying in bulk and buying in volume that we would get the best prices, and yet that's not what it shows. The big $473 billion FY 2016 contracting spending question is, what do we do about these challenges? How do we fix it? So in January, the administration issued an executive order on reducing regulation and controlling regulatory costs, which presents an opportunity to reduce some of this complexity in federal acquisitions. And in May, I dropped a bill that would actually codify this executive order, which I invite all of my colleagues to join. Clearly, this is an issue that both Congress and the administration is focused on. Since GSA is a member of the rulemaking body for the FAR Council, and as a leader of several large acquisition programs, they should seize the opportunity. Finally, a word about a specific acquisition reform proposal. Our committee has been working with Chairman Thornberry on the online marketplace proposal and the National Defense Authorization Act. And we heard from one of the witnesses in March hearing that suggested that we needed to go bold in acquisition reform. This proposal actually would meet that requirement. And under this proposal, GSA would be directed to establish a program to buy commercial products by contracting with several online marketplace providers. These marketplaces would provide a rapid point-and-click transaction, dynamic pricing, and delivery of goods under a standard commercial terms and condition. So in order to inform a continued consideration for this proposal, I'd be interested in hearing what the GSA thinks on this particular proposal, given their significant role in potentially implementing it. I'd like to thank each of you for being here today, for the witnesses, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. And with that, I'll recognize my good friend and the ranking member from the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for calling today's hearing on the General Services Administration recent reorganizations. GSA's Federal Acquisition Service plays an important role in federal procurement policy, procuring government-wide solutions to products such as telecommunications, goods and services, and technology. In past administrations, both Republican and Democratic, the Federal Acquisition Service has been led by career civil servants to ensure that political considerations were not involved in the federal acquisition process. It's important that taxpayers know that when the federal government spends money on things from office supplies to information technology, the contract is negotiated on a nonpartisan basis in the best interest, hopefully, of the taxpayer. GSA also plays an important role in implementing the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, which standardizes the way the government is to conduct security authorization for cloud products and services. Over the past year and a half, after numerous concerns expressed by this committee and by the private sector, I convened a FedRAMP stakeholders meeting to discuss FedRAMP's shortcomings, including costly and delayed certifications. Fortunately, those efforts, along with the work of the Program Management Office, have actually resulted in significant progress over the last year and a half. FedRAMP Ready, FedRAMP Connect, and FedRAMP Accelerated are helping to streamline and speed up the certification process. That process had been allowed to stretch out to as much as 2 years and multi-millions of dollars in expenditures for applicants. That was not the intent of FedRAMP. We've made progress so that that's now down for most applicants to 4 months, although I met with one this week that is on its 3rd year and counting. So we still have progress to make, but I do applaud GSA for finally taking this issue seriously and making progress. GSA recently announced a reorganization effort that included changing the Commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service from a career position to a political appointment for the first time. GSA told committee staff in a bipartisan briefing this change came from the White House itself. This would raise concerns in any administration, but for me, it's downright frightening in this administration. President Trump has the ability to fire the FAS commissioner at the same time that he has pending business at GSA, existing contracts with other agencies, and continues to receive income from other federal investments with his business partners. This is a recipe for abuse of power and certainly conflict of interest, especially under a president who has no qualms about firing lead law enforcement officers investigating his own campaign and senior White House officials. I want to be clear, Mr. Thomas, and not just because you're my constituent. I am in no way questioning your personal integrity. This is not about you personally. It's about ensuring that you and any commissioner who follows is protected from the political process. The GSA reorganization also consolidated the Technology Transformation Service into the Federal Acquisition Service. GSA told committee staff that the rationale for this change was to make it easier to fund GSA's 18F program using the Acquisition Service Fund. It was precisely GSA's use of that revolving fund, however, that the Office of Special Counsel just notified President Trump, resulting in, quote, gross mismanagement. OSC's notification followed disclosures from former Commissioner of FAS Tom Sharp to GSA's Inspector General and OSC regarding mismanagement and violations of law relating to the funding of 18F. However, moving TTS into the Federal Acquisition Service does very little to address the management challenges facing the Technology Transformation Service and 18F that have been identified by the GSA Office of Inspector General. These issues range from disregarding GSA IT security policies for operating and obtaining information technology to 18F's mounting financial losses. Acting Special Counsel Adam Miles wrote in a July 5, 2017 letter to President Trump, and I quote, "Without additional details on improved management controls, the realignment does not address Mr. Sharp's broader, substantiated concerns about mismanagement and his related questions about whether the taxpayers are receiving a solid benefit from this program." Unfortunately, my confidence in GSA has eroded further. A series of actions have called the agency's judgment and independence into question. GSA has resisted oversight and stonewalled members of this committee and other committees in Congress, and I'm disappointed that GSA has still not responded to inquiries from members of this committee regarding its position on President Trump's lease of the old post office building. Prior to President Trump taking office, GSA expressed concern about whether his ownership interests would violate a clause in the lease that prohibits an elected official explicitly from holding an interest in the lease. GSA urged the President to fully divest his financial interests in the old post office lease at that time. After the election, GSA made a complete volte-face, about-face, and decided that the President was not in violation of the lease and provided no rationale for the decision. I think a lot of us, certainly on this side of the aisle, are disappointed that GSA refused to take appropriate actions to protect against conflicts of interest, to protect the President as well as the public interest. Additionally, just yesterday, GSA decided, God knoweth why, to pull the plug on a 10-year effort to consolidate the FBI headquarters into a new location. This decision is a devastating blow to the hardworking men and women of the FBI itself who fight every day to keep this country safe. As reported by the GAO and numerous press accounts, the FBI headquarters is in disrepair and the building literally crumbling around its employees. This is not only devastating for the FBI, but it causes GSA's credibility to suffer with the private sector with whom it's been working this last decade. A number of private sector entities, as well as local jurisdictions, put millions of dollars into the redevelopment and planning in response to the bidding process from GSA. GSA canceled that project yesterday. It did not notify the private partners with which it was working and barely gave us notice up here. This failed procurement harms GSA's credibility and I think is going to cast a cloud over the willingness of serious private sector entities to want to partner with GSA in any kind of complicated turnkey operation such as that involving the FBI headquarters. Finally, political leadership at GSA has used the agency as a political weapon before, and we don't want to revisit that. And it's important that we don't go down that road again in this administration. It was not even 10 years ago that former GSA Administrator Loretta Doan was forced to resign. During her tenure, Ms. Doan sought to use GSA to help Republican lawmakers win re-election and approved a $20,000 no-bid procurement order to a firm run by a friend who had served as her public relations consultant in the private sector. These are the misdeeds that can occur when those at GSA seek to curry political favor instead of working in the best interests of the taxpayer. Trying to shield GSA from that political influence is the first step. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. And before I recognize the chairman of the Subcommittee on Information Technology, I'd like to just recognize the congressional liaison team that's here. We thank you for being here, but specifically our good friend and colleague, Mr. Post, welcome back. I would be remiss, and if you haven't prepped him in the right way, you're going to hear from me. But I recognize the chairman of the IT Subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here once again in partnership with the Government Operations Subcommittee and Chairman Meadows and Ranking Member Connolly. This is our third joint hearing together in this Congress, and I look forward to many more. Back in March, we held a joint subcommittee hearing to review challenges in federal acquisition of IT. What we heard was alarming. For example, the number of first-time federal vendors had fallen to a 10-year low, down from 24% in 2007 to 13% in 2016. The federal government is supposed to buy commercial, but with 34 different definitions of a commercial item in federal regulations, and 138 potentially applicable clauses for such transactions, it's hardly a situation conducive to commercial viability. One of our witnesses at the March hearing, Dee Lee, chair of the Section 809 panel, urged Congress to go bold. Another witness stated that the time was ripe to change the way the federal government acquired IT. I look forward to hearing today how the reorganization of TTS will help GSA fulfill its mission. I'm also interested in hearing an update on how the FedRAMP program and ways that we can help streamline this cumbersome but important process. Lastly, I want to applaud Chairman Thornberry's efforts to streamline acquisition within the Department of Defense and across the federal government. In an era when the click of a button can deliver nearly every imaginable consumer good, there's no reason why the U.S. government should be jumping through expensive hoops to buy a pack of pencils. This is not an easy issue to reform. We have great challenges in front of us, but we also have an opportunity to significantly streamline our nation's outdated acquisition process. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the chairman. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman who is truly a definition. When you look up that in the dictionary, it should have your picture. And so the gentleman recognizes Ms. Kelly for her opening statement.
Thank you so much. My chair doesn't say that.
But he was thinking it.
Chairman Meadows and Hurd and my colleague, Ranking Member Connolly, thank you for calling today's hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. There's been a series of major changes within the GSA. These changes deserve greater attention from Congress, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to learn more about these decisions that directly impact GSA's ability to complete its mission. In May 2016, GSA launched the Technology Transformation Service, or TTS, which combined the Office of Citizen Services and Innovative Technologies, the Presidential Innovations Fellows, and 18F to create a one-stop shop to build, buy, and share technology solutions. This consolidation makes sense, but does raise some important questions, and I look forward to hearing your answers. Last month, GSA announced that TTS would be housed within the Federal Acquisition Service, or FAS. I look forward to better understanding the details of this merger and how it will affect the work of FAS and TTS. This reorganizing was also accompanied by an announcement that the head of FAS would become a political appointee. For more than a decade, the FAS commissioner has been a career GSA employee, which carries real benefits. I have some serious concerns about politicalization, I'm not feeling well, of FAS commissioner position, especially given the recent decision to expand FAS responsibilities to include TTS. With more and more at stake in this critical office, we need an FAS commissioner who can rise above the political volatility of our current moment and remain completely and totally independent. Furthermore, I'm concerned about the utter lack of transparency from GAS in this new administration. In December, following the 2016 presidential election, members of the Oversight Committee sent a request pursuant to the 7-member rule to GSS. For those unfamiliar with the 7-member rule, it requires an executive branch agency to provide any requested information by any 7 members of the Oversight Committee. GSA provided the documents responsive to the request within 2 weeks, and we thank you. This year, members of the Oversight Committee sent GSA another request pursuant to the 7-member rule. To date, GSA has not responded to either request. This cannot be the status quo. GSA plays a critical role in our government, and the American people deserve answers and transparency, especially when those Americans are members of this committee. In the coming months and years, our committee will be working with GSA to continue improving and streamlining IT acquisition efforts, reform FedRAMP, and implement the MGT Act. We need a GSA that is responsive, transparent, and most importantly, accountable to Congress. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses today. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time. Bye-bye.
I thank you. We'll hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any member who would like to submit a written statement. We'll now recognize our panel of witnesses. They have just called votes, and so what we're going to do is we're going to do our best to get both of you to do your opening testimony where you can get that out of the way, and then we'll take a recess for the question and answer portion. But I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Alan Thomas, Commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service for the GSA, and Mr. Rob Cook, Deputy Commissioner and Director of Technology Transformation Services at GSA. We welcome you both. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify, so if you'll please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, thank you. Please be seated and let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative, again, in order to allow time for questions and answers and hopefully to get us back through this. If you'll limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes, but we'll provide your entire written statement in the record. So, Mr. Thomas, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Meadows and Chairman Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, and members of the Government Operations and Information Technology subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today and discuss the U.S. General Services Administration's Federal Acquisition Service. I'm honored to be here today for the first time as Commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service, or FAS as we call it, as today marks my 12th day on the job. Considering my new tenure at the helm of FAS, I will start by giving you a brief overview of who I am and the perspective I will bring to the role of Commissioner. I come to GSA as an outsider, but with a perspective informed through multiple interactions with the agency through different roles throughout my career. For example, I've led a technology startup and accessing the federal marketplace using IT Schedule 70 and built a $7 million business line using that access. I've participated as a consultant in the merging of the Federal Supply Service and the Federal Technology Service. I've served as a federal employee and used a GSA-managed multiple award schedule contract to acquire professional services in support of an R&D program in my portfolio. Finally, I've managed a rapidly growing business unit for one of the most successful Alliance small business prime contract holders. These roles have shown me GSA from the viewpoint of a startup company, an established small business, and that of a federal employee. As Commissioner, I aim to keep all these perspectives in mind as GSA's impact on federal acquisition is wide and deep. My philosophy and approach for combining the mission and resources of TTS and FAS is to first listen intently, starting with the internal GSA team and our customers, then widening to encompass our industry partners and external stakeholders. I want to ensure that we are providing the best possible products and services to our customers and delivering value for the American taxpayer. Observing FAS from my vantage point as an outsider will provide valuable insight into how we achieve our goals. When meeting with programs, I've been asking 3 simple questions. What's most important to keep? What's most important to change? And what are the obstacles to change? Second, I'm going to utilize key members of the existing team, including my colleague and partner, Rob Cook, the Technology Transformation Services Deputy Commissioner, whom you'll be hearing from shortly, and the rest of our senior team at GSA to better understand the organization's culture. The only expectation I bring is that our culture is compatible with my core values of honesty, courage, and graciousness. Third, I'm going to strive to be a leader without presumption, who's transparent in my interactions with staff, customers, industry, and stakeholders. I've played or coached team sports all my life, and I know the only way we're going to accomplish ambitious goals is if we all understand and play our roles, trust each other to find common ground, and build an organization with shared purpose. President Truman said it best when he stated, "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit." So as I delve deeper into my role in FAS over the next few months, my focus is going to be on execution and performance. I'm confident that we'll build a high-performing team that executes on our objectives and delivers results for the American people. Before I close, I want to tell you that in my short time at GSA, I'm excited about what I see, and I'm optimistic about what we can accomplish because we have great people. I look forward to working in partnership with this committee to execute an ambitious government reform agenda laid out by the administration and implement innovative legislation such as the Modernizing Government Technology Act, the Value-Based Procurement Bill, and the National Defense Authorization Act. There is still a lot more work that needs to be done, but I'm confident that together we're going to make a lasting impact delivering value for the American taxpayer. Thank you for the opportunity to come here today, and I look forward to answering your questions about how best to encourage innovation and reform.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Actually get an A for your opening statement on 12 days. Anybody who comes in under 5 minutes certainly gets an A from everybody up here on our committee. The second part is Truman quote. It's my favorite quote of all time, so you get an A+.
Shorter is better, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
amen. Mr. Cook, you've got a high bar to accomplish here. You're recognized.
I'm nervous, all right. Thank you, Chairman Meadows, Chairman Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you about technology. I like doing that. And everyone here is familiar with the problems facing federal IT. We have too many legacy systems. Systems are insecure, they're expensive to maintain, and our technology projects are frequently over budget, behind schedule, and don't really deliver even at that on what they promised. So there seems to be a broad agreement on the problem. The question is, what do we do about it? Fortunately, there have also been a number of government successes in technology recently, and we now know what works inside government to approach this. And it's a combination of three factors. It's getting the right talent, it's the partners, and process. So let me talk about each of those. First on talent, we'll never solve the problem unless we've got great top tech talent inside government. We've learned that some great people in technology will come to government as career feds, but a lot more have private sector careers. And they don't necessarily want a lifetime career in government, but they're happy to come serve for a tour of duty. This gives us a bigger pool of applicants, and it gives a constant refresh of talent from the front lines because technology is constantly changing. And let me note that having tech talent inside the government does not change the fact that most of the work is going to be done in the private sector. What this does is to give government the savvy it needs to be a good partner with the private sector. So to plan well, to make good decisions, to manage projects, to be a better buyer. So the second factor after talent is partners. The talent that's been missing is a key ingredient, but it's just an ingredient. We cannot move the needle in government without people and partners inside government who know government well. And that includes in the agencies, in GSA, in OMB. And the third is the process. This old so-called waterfall approach was to plan everything out in advance, but technology's just gotten too complex for that, and that process just doesn't work anymore. What's needed instead is an iterative planning approach. So you build a bit, get feedback from people who are actually going to use it, and course correct, and build a bit more. The center of the process has to be the user, and you have to be agile so you can change in response to their feedback. So we know this combination of talent, partners, and process works. An example is the implementation of the Data Act. 18F partnered with Treasury, and we took an iterative, user-centric, agile approach. Vendors did most of the work, but we were clear about what we needed them to build. We managed the process well, and we were good partners. The result was a successful project that was delivered on time and under budget. That, I hear, is not the norm in government, but it should be. So government technology has its challenges, but we know how to address them. The chance to help in this cause is the reason people come to TTS. It's why I came here last fall after a long career in the private sector. It won't be easy, but this is a moment in time when we can actually do it. And there's several reasons that I say that, and I'm hopeful. First, there are these recent successes that we've had that show us how to do it. Second, for TTS, our recent merger with the Federal Acquisition Service gives us flexibilities and structural support we need to do the part that we want, that we're intended to play. Third, FITARA has given CIOs authority and encouraged this incremental development practices. And fourth, the Modernizing Government Technology Act provides vital financial support, and it addresses the single-year funding limitation, which has been such a barrier to fixing the IT problem. This act is a strong and practical indication that we're serious about this. And finally, The strong bipartisan support we've seen for this endeavor is crucial. I have found it very moving and encouraging. It reinforces the fact that this work is just plain good for the country. This country of ours has largely led the technology revolution that's changing almost every aspect of our economy and society. This government of ours should not be lagging behind. It should be leading the way in using technology to provide better service, more efficiency, and more transparency for taxpayers. So we at TDS are excited by the opportunity before us and grateful to be part of the effort, and we're looking forward to working with agencies, with industry, and with Congress in this undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. We will go ahead at this point, just from a planning standpoint, we're going to declare a recess, but no more than 15 minutes before we probably call back in, so you can go wherever you want to go for 15 minutes. So the subcommittee stand in recess, subject to the call of the chair. All right, the subcommittees will come back to order. Thank you for your graciousness, for your time. Obviously, 15 minutes in Congress is a lot longer than 15 minutes. My apologies. And I'm going to go ahead and recognize myself for a series of questions, and then as we get into this, as some of the others come back, typically when this happens, we lose a whole lot of energy. So my apologies. Do not take that as less than of a priority, just more as a conflict of schedules. We have 20 half meetings a day, and so hopefully this is a full hearing as we go forward. So Mr. Thomas, let me come to you. We've got an issue when it comes to this whole procurement side of things, and what I mentioned in my opening comments was the fact that I can go on Amazon and buy things cheaper than you can buy as a government contractor. How do we fix that? So just pure and simple, I know 12 days in, give me 12 days of wisdom and years of experience, if you could. How do we fix that? And are y'all committed to getting it fixed where the American taxpayer quits reading about the purchase of $500 hammers?
So let me first start off by saying, yes, I'm committed to fixing it. I mean, it's one of the reasons when I was asked to serve that I decided to come back, right, to streamline and simplify the procurement process. I mean, I think you raise a valid issue that definitely needs to be addressed. We are pretty excited about the Thornberry bill and the ability of the commercial marketplaces and GSA's role to sort of sponsor and broker those and help make those work within the construct of the federal procurement system. We think that's a real step in the right direction, and from our standpoint, I think we're supportive. We've enjoyed working with the committee on that, or with the Congress on that particular bill, and helping you all shape that legislation. So I think that's a step in the right direction. There are other things we're doing to try and make it simpler for vendors to get on schedule. So there's the Making It Easier initiative we have within GSA, which aims to cut the amount of time and effort it takes, particularly for small and innovative businesses, to get on the schedules, the information technology schedule. We've seen some success there in terms of reducing the amount of time and effort that it does take. So we are committed to it. We are taking steps. It's definitely a priority for me. And as you said, 12 days in, I'm listening, learning about what we're doing, and then also trying to come up with thoughtful recommendations for how to get better.
So let me be a little bit more blunt.
Sure.
All right. So you've got all kinds of pages, over 2,000 pages across agencies on what they need to do. Most of that is not read. It's essentially a big dust collector that is out there that gets referred to if it says that we need to keep things the way they've always been. They refer to that 2,000-page document that most of them have never read. So how do we change the culture? Because I've found that there's not a whole lot of risk takers out there. And the minute that you do it, and I'm one that believes that we should be taking some risk and knowing that we will make mistakes. That if we do this, there will be times when we've made a purchase that is not appropriate. At the same time, under what the GSA IG found, every purchase is a problem, because if we're there, we certainly can do better than the status quo. So how do we, and maybe this is a question for both of you, how do we create truly a condition where they're willing to take some risk and willing to get 2,000 pages down to 50 pages and not use it as their leverage to not change?
Sure. So maybe I'll start, Rob, and then if you want to jump in. So I think a couple areas to help address your question. So one would be in terms of encouraging people to take risk. There's a kind of leadership aspect to it, and then there's a statutory regulatory reform aspect to it. So from a leadership standpoint, I think from the top of the procurement organizations, we've got to, as you said, encourage people to go out, think about taking risk, and not necessarily punish them when they make a mistake. If you're drilling for oil, it's okay to drill a few dry holes, right? We're not necessarily going to fire you for that, as long as you're doing your best and making an effort to comply with the rules. I think from a statutory and regulatory standpoint, there's an effort underway. The Section 809 panel actually had a chance to talk with Dee Lee, who's leading that panel, and I know she's testified before this committee a couple of times about some of the initiatives that they are planning to undertake there and some of their interim findings. And I told her I'm really excited about what they're doing. Obviously applies to DOD, but I think there's a great chance to take some of that and apply what they're doing to the civilian side of procurement as well. So I think there's opportunity there. So leadership and also then real concrete statutory and regulatory reform.
All right, Mr. Cook?
Yes, I think you're right about you're right about the risk-averse culture. That's a big factor. I think technology can help a lot in this. Technology's changed so many aspects of our economy. People are shopping online. Why isn't that possible in the federal government? That is an area that's really ripe for change, and technology can be a big part of that change.
All right. Thank you both. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the witnesses. Let's follow up on the chairman's question. So he's talking about his ability to go on to Amazon, and they will, if he's looking for a certain item, they will list 10, 20, 30 vendors, and they'll all have different prices, some with shipping, some with not. But you've got an open marketplace there, and creates competition and drives prices down, as Mr. Cook was saying. So I have a terrible problem in my area, in eastern Massachusetts, in my district, where we got some big government construction projects going on, and I've got some good-sized companies, very, very skilled. These are not mom-and-pop outfits. These are 500, 600 employees. And those contractors cannot bid on the work that's going on in their area. There's a secret handshake thing going on with the DOD. We cannot figure out how the hell how to get into that bidding process and open it up to competition. It is just shut down. It's a good old boy network, and look, I've been a member of Congress for a while, and we can't seem to penetrate that whole operation. You got retired generals that are sort of worked in there, and I know we're not getting the best price. We're not getting the best price. They're driving it up because there's no competition. So let's go back to the chairman's initial question. How do we wire a system that, on the straight procurement basis, we can use that competition that Amazon uses to just put the prices out there, say, this is what we need, give us your best price? It would seem to be a fairly simple proposal, and it's working, famously in private industry. Why can't we do that?
So, Congressman Lynch, thanks for your question. I think we can. It's the short answer, right? I mean, I share some of your concern and frustration. As I mentioned, it's one of the things I'd like to focus on in my service at GSA. I think the bill, the NDAA bill, goes some ways towards addressing that. There are, as you know, some specific regulatory and policy concerns that the federal government has that those of us who just buy as private citizens through Amazon don't necessarily have to take into account. So we want to make sure that those are accounted for in the appropriate way. But I do think introducing commercial marketplaces like that into the government buying process should yield some savings and some speed and offer some simplification.
When are we going to see that happen? Do we need to legislate that, or do you have the ability to do that already?
Well, we're supportive of the legislation that's before the Congress now, and we're hopeful that it will pass. And we, as I said earlier, we'd like to try and fully implement it. We think there are benefits there. So yes, legislation would be helpful.
All right. Mr. Cook, you got anything on this?
Yes, you're right. The hurdles make make the federal marketplace less competitive. It disadvantages small businesses, as you were saying, 500 or 600 people, which is small, I guess. But it disadvantages companies of that size and smaller, and it makes things more expensive for the federal government because there are fewer bidders. So we are working on the technology side to try to use the power of technology to open things up by doing things like making it possible to have people buy things online in the same way they do at home. That's the goal, and that's what we're working toward. That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I see, so Raytheon is a big player in the defense industry, and I see them, they have these small bidder conferences where they'll invite all these small and mid-sized companies in to bid on parts of their contract. So, if they can do it, I mean, we should be able to do the exact same thing.
We should.
Yeah, all right. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. So let me do a follow-up with that because the gentleman and I agree on this. So here's what I would ask is, and I think you're referring to the language that's in the NDAA that you're hopeful that it gets signed into law. Is that correct, Mr.
Section
Thomas?
801, yes.
Okay. So if indeed that gets signed into law, that's one good area. But here's what I would ask you, give this committee in the next 30 days, is a list of both legislative and administrative things that could be done to accomplish what Mr. Lynch and I both agree needs to be done. And if you can report back to this committee with a list of suggestions on where you could have an administrative fix and where you could have a legislative fix to accomplish that task. Is that fine with the gentleman?
That's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today to discuss reforms. Welcome. Happening at GSA. Early this year, I repeatedly petitioned the former Chairman Chafis to address some people will say conflict of interest, or some will say the appearance, or some will say the concern of our president's Trump organization lease with GSA. During our organization meeting, I offered up an amendment that required the committee to investigate what I feel is a blatant conflict of interest regarding the Trump Hotel. It is our committee's responsibility to conduct oversight of the federal government, hence my concern about a political appointment. While my amendment was defeated at that time, I hope the committee's new leadership will re-examine these concerns. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. The purpose of Oversight Committee, as I understand and took my oath to serve here in Congress, is that we, as a government, ensure that there are tax dollars that are being used in our relationships and lease and all of those acquisition and allocation of funds for purchases are done without any disrespect of the taxpayer who has an expectation of government. And even though our president has moved his interest to a trust, placing his sons in charge is still deeply concerning. While the GSA has cleared the president of any contract violation, it's not hard to imagine how any future dispute could quickly go off the rails if there's any issue with the lease, hence a political appointment. So where is I would say my concern, deep concern, is that you coming in, and I hear the term as looking at this as a upstart or a new company, and all the vision and experience that you've had when you look at a company that's coming in, starting, and how you can use innovation and all the things that you're bringing, which we so need in government. I appreciate it. My question to you, how does GSA plan on approaching future negotiations with the children of the President of the United States, and how do we take this beyond this current administration? Where is the future for anyone coming into the presidential office when it comes to leases with our government properties where it says no elected official shall enter into a lease. And given that this clause is standard practice to include on all leases, how can GSA do, what can you do to enforce compliance with this requirement? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Congresswoman Lawrence. As you know, I'm the Commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service. There's a sister service within GSA, if you will, the Public Building Service, that has an acting commissioner right now. So the question of leases and how we handle leases is really outside of my purview. I'm happy to take the question back to my colleagues and follow up with a written response to you, if that's okay.
So if it's outside, who does every person report to?
The Commissioner of the Public Building Service and myself, the Commissioner of the Acquisition Service, Federal Acquisition Service, we both report to the administrator. In this case, it's an acting administrator, Mr. Tim Horn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does the gentleman yield back?
I yield back,
All
sir.
right. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Thomas, I want to address GSA's lack of cooperation with Congress. The Trump administration released an opinion issued by the Office of Legal Counsel on May 1st, 2017, arguing that agencies and departments could ignore requests for documents and other information from members of Congress other than Republican committee chairmen. On June 7, 2017, Senator Chuck Grassley wrote a scathing letter to President Trump urging him to reject the OLC opinion. He said, and I quote, "Every member of Congress is a constitutional officer duly elected to represent and cast votes in the interests of their constituents." Do you both agree with Senator Grassley?
Congresswoman Kelly, we certainly take the committee and the Congress's oversight role seriously. Believe it's an essential part of the system. The agency evaluates every oversight request on an individual basis, and I'm happy to take that concern back and get it addressed for you.
Thank you. Mr. Cook, did you?
This is just way outside my area of expertise, and so I'll just leave it to with what Alan said.
Every member of Congress has the constitutional responsibility to conduct oversight of the executive branch in order to inform our legislative actions. Since President Trump took office, however, GSA has adopted a new policy. This morning, GSA Administrator Tim Horn testified before the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure that GSA will only respond to oversight inquiries from committee chairs. Have either of you received any guidance, written or oral, on how you should respond to requests for information from members of Congress and their staff? And who communicated this policy and how was it communicated?
I have not.
I have not either.
Okay. The new policy appears to directly contradict an existing GSA policy on communications with Congress. On February 20th, 2015, then GSA Administrator Dan Tagliani issued an order to GSA employees setting a policy for responding to inquiries from Congress. That order applies the same procedures for responding to all members of Congress and their staff, regardless of political party. Has Administrator Horn issued a new order to overturn that 2015 order? Are any of you aware of that?
I don't know whether one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm not aware either. Again, I've only been there 12 days, so I may.
Right.
but I'm not aware of it.
Okay. In the absence of a new order, that 2015 order is still in effect. So if you or anyone in your office is instructing GSA employees to follow a different policy for responding to Congress, you are telling them to violate a standing GSA order. The Whistleblower Protection Act requires that every executive branch policy on communications with Congress include language explicitly noting that the policy does not affect an employee's legal right to communicate with Congress. Has GSA included the language required by the Whistleblower Protection Act in communications to agency staff about the new policy on responding to Congress?
Congresswoman Kelly, I don't know. I'm happy to come back to you with an answer on that, but I don't know. I'm sorry.
Same here.
Okay. Will you commit today to respond to requests, like you said you would, from members of Congress, regardless of whether they are Republicans or Democrats, or whether they are in the majority or the minority of Congress?
One thing that we are in the Technology Transformation Service is very nonpartisan. We don't care where the request comes from.
I appreciate that. In order to adequately address the significant issues that currently face GSA, it's going to require cooperation and a willingness to be held accountable in order for you to restore faith in the agency. And as you can see just from sitting here, that all of us work very well together, the two chairs and the two ranking members, to try to get things done in this space. So we appreciate all the cooperation we can get. Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady for her questioning, for yielding back, and we want to thank our witnesses and the support staff who are here today for you taking the time and filling us in. And with that, we are adjourned.